It was rush hour when the sarin gas began to spread through Japan's subway system, released from plastic bags onto 5 crowded trains. 13 people were killed and some 6,000 others made violently ill in the attack, deemed the worst act of domestic terrorism in Japan's modern history.
Plans to head back out there and be a little bit more thorough, while really hoping to find some remains of sheep.
On Chris's second visit, he found remnants of sheep, believed to be the test dummies for the Tokyo attack.
I did recover one sheep skull, and I did recover a number of ear tags, which are most likely those very tags from the sheep that they were experimenting on.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Shaun Jeffery.
There are moments in history that may seem trivial at the time they take place. Important to the people taking part in these moments for sure, but if you were just a casual viewer bearing witness, you'd be forgiven for not understanding the far-reaching ramifications that these moments would have later in history. For example, if you had been living in Portsmouth Harbour, a large natural harbour in Hampshire, England, on the 13th of May in the year 1787, which was a Sunday in case you were wondering, you may have bared witness to just such a moment in history. A moment that may have seemed trivial to you going about your regular morning routine, but what you had just seen, the departure of a handful of Royal British naval ships, one naval frigate, the Hyena, 2 naval escort ships named HMS Supply and Sirius, which were themselves escorting 6 convict transport ships, the Alexander, Charlotte, Friendship, Lady Penrhyn, the Prince of Wales and the Scarborough, as well as 3 food and supply ships, the Golden Grove, the Fishburne and the Borrowdale. This event, this seemingly small moment in history, the departure of a dozen Royal Naval ships, would undoubtedly change the world forever. This fleet of ships would become known as the First Fleet, and along with the founding of the penal colonies to send English convicts, this handful of ships would introduce livestock, diseases and invasive species that would both adapt and devastate the ecosystems of a faraway, unknown continent, a continent on the other side of the world. It would lead to the establishment of an entire nation. It would bring about the establishment of farms and pastoral lands, the development of sheep and cattle stations that are larger than entire countries, vast tracts of open, uninhabited land where, as we'll soon hear, people can get up to all manner of strange and mysterious deeds, even allowing for such large, quiet, out-of-the-way properties that a Japanese death cult could plan for the end of the world. But for now, we've just witnessed 12 Royal Naval ships depart from the harbour at Portsmouth, the year 1787. So, let's begin there. The first fleet left Portsmouth, England on the 13th of May, 1787, under the command of Commodore Arthur Phillip, who was given instructions authorising him to make regulations and land grants in the soon-to-be settled new colony. The journey began with fine weather, and thus the convicts were allowed up on deck to begin with. The fleet was accompanied by the armed frigate Hyena, until it left English waters, at which point she turned back for England. On the 20th of May, 1787, one convict aboard the Scarborough reported a planned mutiny. Those allegedly involved were flogged and 2 convicts were transferred to the Prince of Wales. In general, however, most accounts of the voyage agree that the convicts were well behaved. On the 3rd of June 1787, the fleet anchored at Santa Cruz at Tenerife. Here, fresh water, vegetables and meat were brought on board. On the 10th of June, they set sail across the Atlantic to Rio de Janeiro, taking advantage of good trade winds and the favourable ocean currents. The weather became increasingly hot and humid as the fleet sailed through the tropics. Vermin, such as rats, and parasites such as bedbugs, lice, cockroaches and fleas tormented the convicts, officers and marines alike. The ship's bilges became so foul and the smell, especially below the closed hatches, was overpowering. While orders were given that the bilge water was to be pumped out daily and the bilges cleaned, these orders were not followed on the Alexander, and a number of convicts fell sick and died. Tropical rainstorms meant that the convicts could not exercise on deck as they had no change of clothes and no method of drying out their wet clothing. Consequently, they were kept below in the foul, cramped holds. On the female transports, sexual activity between convicts, the crew and the marines was running rampant. Needless to say, crossing the open ocean a few hundred years ago was nay a good time. The fleet reached Rio de Janeiro on the 5th of August and stayed for a month. The ships were cleaned and water taken on board. Repairs were made and large quantities of food ordered. The female convicts' clothing had become infested with lice and had to be burnt. As additional clothing for the female convicts had not arrived before the fleet left England, the women were issued with new clothes made from rice sacks. Oof, good times. The fleet left Rio de Janeiro on the 4th of September to run before the mighty westerlies. The westerlies, anti-trades or the prevailing westerlies, are the prevailing winds that blow from the west toward the east in the middle latitudes between 30 and 60 degrees latitude. These favourable winds would, hopefully, push the fleet all the way to the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa, which it did. The fleet reached the Cape of Good Hope on the 13th of October. This was the last port of call, so the main task was to stock up on plants, seeds and livestock for their arrival at the new colony. Here is another important, yet seemingly random moment in history. The livestock taken on board from the Cape of Good Hope, destined for the new colony of what would become known as Australia. This would be the beginnings of an entire new ecosystem for the Australian continent. The livestock taken on board included 2 bulls, 7 cows, 1 stallion, 3 mares, 44 sheep, 32 pigs, 4 goats, and, quote, a very large quantity of poultry of every kind, end quote. Whilst in port, the women convicts of the Friendship were moved to other transports to make room for the livestock purchased. The convicts were provided with fresh beef and mutton, bread and vegetables to build up their strength for the following journey into the unknown. The Dutch colony of Cape Town, on the Cape of Good Hope, was the last outpost of European settlement, which the fleet members would see for years, perhaps for the rest of their lives. The following is a quote from a book by Robert Hughes titled The Fatal Shore. Philip's officers hated Cape Town, The Dutch, the Kaffirs, the heat, the dust. Nevertheless, it was the last civilised place. The last repository of recognisable European values that the men and women of the First Fleet would see for years. And the thought must have lain heavily on them when at last the tars stood to the capstans and the anchor cables rose dripping through their hawser holes. This was the end of Europe. Before them stretched the awesome, lonely void of the Indian and Southern Oceans, and beyond that lay nothing they could imagine. Assisted by the gales in the quote roaring 40s, the latitudes below the 40th parallel, the heavily laden transport surged through the violent seas. In the last 2 months of the voyage, the fleet faced challenging conditions, spending some days becalmed and, on others, covering significant distances. The Friendship, for example, in one day, travelled 166 miles, nearly 270 kilometres. Not everything was smooth sailing, though. A seaman was blown from the Prince of Wales at night in a storm and drowned. Water was rationed as supplies ran low, and the supply of other goods, including wine, ran out altogether on some vessels. On the 25th of November, Commodore Arthur Phillip transferred to the Supply. He had a plan to put into action. With Commodore Phillip aboard the Supply and accompanied by the Alexander, the Friendship and Scarborough, the fastest ships in the fleet, which were carrying most of the male convicts, the Supply hastened ahead to prepare for the arrival of the rest of the fleet. Tasmania, then known as Van Diemen's Land, was sighted from the Friendship on the 4th of January, 1788. However, a freak storm struck as they began to head around the north of the island, damaging the sails and masts of some of the ships, but they were on the final stretch now, their goal almost within reach. Commodore Phillip intended to select a suitable location, find good water, clear the ground, and perhaps even have some huts and other structures built before the others arrived. This was a planned move, discussed by the Home Office and the Admiralty prior to the fleet's departure from England. However, this quote, flying squadron, comprised of Commodore Phillip aboard the Supply accompanied by the fastest ships of the fleet, reached Botany Bay only just before the rest of the fleet arrived, so no preparatory work was possible. The Supply reached the shores of Botany Bay on the 18th of January, 1788. The 3 fastest transports in the advance group arrived only the next day, the 19th of January, and the slower ships arrived a day after that, on the 20th of January. This marked one of the world's greatest sea voyages. 11 vessels, carrying about 1,487 people, along with stores and provisions to establish a new colony, had travelled for 252 days, for more than 15,000 miles, 24,000 kilometres, to the other side of the globe, without losing a single ship. 48 people died on the journey. This calculates out to a death rate of just over 3%. However, 28 births were also recorded. So, hey, they almost broke even. 18 years earlier, on the 29th of April 1770, Captain James Cook and crew made their first landfall on the mainland of the continent at a place now known as the Kurnell Peninsula. Cook originally christened the area as Stingray Bay, but later he crossed this out and named it Botany Bay, after the unique specimens retrieved by the botanists Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander. It is here that James Cook made first contact with an Aboriginal tribe known as the Guiagal. Cook had reported Botany Bay as a suitable spot for the planned settlement of the proposed future New South Wales penal colony. Skip forward 18 years though, to the arrival of Commodore Phillip and his first fleet, where our story currently takes place, and unfortunately, it was soon realised that Botany Bay did not live up to the glowing account that the explorer Captain James Cook had provided years earlier. The bay was open and unprotected. The water was too shallow to allow the ships to anchor close to the shore. Fresh water was scarce and the soil was shit. First contact was made with the local indigenous people, the Eora, who seemed curious but suspicious of these newcomers. The area was studded with enormously strong trees. When the convicts tried to cut them down, their tools broke, and the tree trunks had to be blasted out of the ground with gunpowder. The primitive huts built for the officers and officials quickly collapsed in rainstorms. The Marines had a habit of getting drunk and not guarding the convicts properly, whilst their commander, Major Robert Ross, drove Commodore Arthur Phillip to despair with his, quote, arrogant and lazy attitude. Crucially, Phillip worried that his fledgling colony was exposed to attack from Aborigines or from foreign powers. Although his initial instructions were to establish the colony at Botany Bay, he was authorised to establish the colony elsewhere if he deemed it necessary. On the morning of the 24th of January, the party was startled when 2 French ships were seen just outside of Botany Bay. This was a scientific expedition led by Jean-François de la Pérouse. The French had expected to find a thriving colony where they could repair their ships and restock on supplies, not a newly arrived fleet of convicts considerably more poorly provisioned than themselves. These convicts weren't in a position to help anyone out. There was some polite contact between the French and British officers, but Commodore Phillip and La Pérouse never met. The French ships remained until the 10th of March before setting sail on their return voyage. The French vessels were never seen again. They were later discovered to have been shipwrecked off the coast of Vanikoro, in the present-day Solomon Islands. On the 26th of January, 1788, the First Fleet weighed anchor and sailed to Port Jackson. The site selected for the anchorage had deep water close to the shore, was sheltered, and had a small stream flowing into it. Commodore Phillip named it Sydney Cove, after Lord Sydney, the British Home Secretary. The ships of the First Fleet mostly did not remain in the colony though. Some returned to England, while others left for other ports. Some remained in the service of the now Governor Phillip for some months. Some of these were sent to Norfolk Island, where a second penal colony was established. After the initial arrival, things began to happen very quickly. 2 years later, in 1790, the lesser-known Second Fleet of convicts arrived in Sydney Cove. And the year after that, 1791, the even lesser-known Third Fleet of convicts arrived. By January 1793, the first free settlers arrived in New South Wales, and the story of the rapid development of the Australian livestock industry began. So you might be asking, how the fuck does all of this tie together, Shaun? What are you dribbling on about, and why do we care about sheep? Bear with me. As we know, the First Fleet brought the initial population of 44 sheep from the Cape of Good Hope to Australia in 1788. The next import shipment was of 30 sheep from Calcutta and Ireland in 1793. All of the early sheep brought to Australia were exclusively used for the dietary needs of the penal colonies. However, the growth of the livestock industry in Australia was nothing short of explosive. By 1820, the continent held 100,000 sheep. A decade later, it had 1 million. By 1840, New South Wales alone kept 4 million head of sheep. Flock numbers grew to 13 million in another decade. In less than 100 years, the initial group of 44 imported merino sheep brought by Commodore Phillips and his First Fleet, along with later additional imports, had grown to over 15 million head of sheep. wool production was a fitting industry for colonies so far from their home nations. Before we had the ability of fast air and modern maritime shipping, wool was one of the few viable products that was not subject to spoiling on the long passage back to British ports. By the 1850s, the Australian livestock industry was absolutely fucking huge, and it was only getting bigger. In 1863, the largest sheep station in the world, Anna Creek Station, was established.
Yeah, well, it's 24,000 square kilometres or 6 million acres. Well, it's meant to be the size of Belgium, so they say, but I've never been there, so I couldn't tell you. We live in a desert, so it always looks like it's dry, although most of the stuff that grows here is very nutritious. We don't need very much rain to make it spring to life, you know, and it's a very productive country if you get the water on it. And when we get a decent rainfall, until the dams go dry, we've got about probably 9 to 12 months maximum. Well, that's the way this country is, you know. You just got to learn to live with it a bit and go along with it. You can't go against it, you'll never win.
Anna Creek Station has an area of 23,677 square kilometres, 9,142 square miles, which is just slightly larger than Israel. It is 1,977,000 acres, 8,000 square kilometres or 3,089 square miles larger than its nearest rival, which is Alexandria Station, also in Australia, in the country's Northern Territory. Anna Creek Station is over 7 times the size of the United States' biggest ranch, King Ranch in Texas. What's that saying? Everything is bigger in Texas? Is it, mate? Try visit Western Australia. Western Australia is unique in not only the area it covers, but also the spread of the population over the entire state. Western Australia covers more than 2.6 million square kilometres, 10,021,748 square miles. That's the combined size of Alaska and Texas. Let me just say that again. WA is the combined size of Alaska and Texas, with a population of only 2.6 million people. That's a shitload of land, and not that many people, which leads to a lot of open space. Banjuan Station is a remote cattle station that previously operated as a sheep station in Western Australia. Banjuan Station is one of the 70 largest stations in Australia, which in itself is essentially a list of the biggest livestock stations in the world. Top 10 deadliest snakes in the world, all found in Australia. Biggest farms, yeah, it's us too. But we also invented Wi-Fi, permaculture, the bionic ear implant, the black box, medicalised penicillin, the polymer banknote, Google Maps, ultrasounds, the electric drill, and the goon bag, and the Hills hoist. Combine those last two and you have Goon of Fortune, possibly one of our proudest achievements. Not bad for a nation established by convicts. We're not solely a country of sheep and cattle farmers. We're a multifaceted bunch. But anyway, back to Banjuan Station. The Banjuan Cattle Station is situated 220 miles or 350 k's north of Kalgoorlie, 500 miles or 800 kilometres north-east of Perth, on the edge of the Great Victoria Desert in the community of Lenora. It covers an area of 404,680 hectares, 999,986 acres. The land is a mix of wandery, mulga saltbush and grasslands that support both annual and perennial grasses. Gum trees and mulga follow the 4 main creeks and other watercourses on the property. There is also several waterholes and lake systems found there. The station was established in 1903 and has had a series of owners throughout its more than 100-year history. The most interesting amongst the previous owners of this remote cattle station, though, and the one I would like to tell you listeners about, is that of the Japanese doomsday cult, Om Shinrikyo. Om Shinrikyo is a Japanese doomsday cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984. It has since rebranded and now goes by Aleph. It carried out the deadly Tokyo subway sarin attack in 1995 and another smaller sarin attack the previous year. But I would like to focus on their time spent in Australia and what took place at the remote cattle and sheep station they purchased in the remote outback of Western Australia. The following information comes straight from a document created by the United States of America's Senate Government Affairs Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. The document is titled Global Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction, a Case Study on the Om Shinrikyo, October 31st, 1995. The section that I would like to read is Section 6, Subsection B, which is titled The Om Shinrikyo in Australia. And now in this reading from the Senate Subcommittee, when they reference the staff, I'm not sure if that's referencing internal staff members from the Senate Subcommittee or if it's referencing spooks from the CIA or internal plants in Om Shinrikyo, but it's capitalized, so they reference it as the staff. So yeah, when it says the staff, I don't know, picture some fucking shady dudes from some government body that somehow have all of this inside information about Om Shinrikyo. But nevertheless, the Om's most intriguing presence may be in Australia. The staff has confirmed that the Om was in Australia from April 1993 to October 1994. From documents provided to the staff by the Australian Federal Police, the staff determined the cult purchased a 500,000-acre sheep farm in Banjawan, Australia. In order to purchase this farm, the cult formed a front company named Clarity Investments Limited in May of 1993, and another company, Maha Pasaya Australia Limited, in June of 1993. Maya Pasaya was also used to import electrical equipment including transformers, static converters, generators, coaxial cabling, batteries, meters and tools and protective equipment into Australia in September of 1993. The Australian Federal Police gave the staff documents confirming that in April 1993, 3 members of Om Shinrikyo arrived in Perth from Tokyo. The 3 included Construction Minister Kiyohide Hayakawa, who was also the person instrumental in setting up the Om's operations in Russia, as well as Intelligence Minister Yoshihiro Inu. They hired an Australian citizen of Japanese heritage who was a real estate agent based in Perth to view remote farming properties in Western Australia which were then for sale. They were evasive with the agent about their specific requirements, however, it became apparent that they were looking for a remote area with special conditions. The group indicated that they wanted to inspect properties where they could, quote, conduct experiments of benefit to humankind, end quote. That doesn't sound suspicious at all, does it? The group was flown to several properties in the period between April 23rd and April 26, 1993. After landing at each remote station, they went off by themselves for some hours. While inspecting these properties, they conducted unknown experiments utilizing a laptop computer, attachments and electrodes which were placed into the ground. Hayakawa and another of the Om leaders in the threesome may have also travelled to Tasmania and an area in South Australia where a large uranium deposit is located. Ultimately though, the group decided on the property in Banjawan, an area where there is a known uranium deposit. In April 1993, Hayakawa allegedly offered to purchase Banjawan Station for cash. However, the offer was refused by the owner. Following this refusal, the ORM formed Clarity Investments and Maya Posaya Australia. These companies were created for the claimed purpose of applying for mining and exploration leases. In June 1993, the ORM used Maya Posaya as a front company to purchase Banjawan Station for approximately $400,000. Shoko Asahara and Yusoko Shimada, an Australian citizen of Japanese descent and sect member, were named as the directors of each company. Hayakawa contacted a consulting geologist after learning that Banjawan Station is a pastoral lease, meaning that other individuals could enter the property for the purpose of prospecting for minerals. Hayakawa did not want any unauthorised person to enter Banjawan Station. It is unclear if he succeeded in having the lease changed. However, the ORM did purchase 8 mining leases from the Western Australian Department of Minerals and Energy in September of 1993 for approximately $4,700 each. The staff has also confirmed that at about this same time, Hayakawa and another cult member, Tsuyoshi Maki, applied for tourist visas at the Australian Embassy in Tokyo. Hayakawa and Maki arrived in Perth on September the 3rd, 1993. Shortly after arriving in Australia, they met with their consulting geologist. During that meeting, they told the geologist they wished to obtain a ship and inquired of her what price they could expect to pay. They also mentioned at the meeting that they wanted to export the uranium ore from Banjawan Station in 44-gallon drums. During the following week, Hayakawa and Maki engaged an Australian travel agent to make arrangements for 6 four-wheel drive vehicles and a chartered aircraft. The staff has also confirmed that at the end of that same week, cult leader Shoko Asahara arrived in Perth with 24 followers from Japan, including 5 females under the age of 15 who were travelling without their parents. Also in the group were Hideo Murai, the cult's Science and Technology Minister, Nimi Tomomitsu, the Home Affairs Minister, as well as Yoshiro Inu. The ORM group travelled with chemicals and mining equipment on which they paid over 20,000 Australian dollars in excess baggage fees. According to an Australian Federal Police report, among the baggage was a mechanical ditch digger, picks, petrol generators, gas masks, respirators and shovels. A customs duty of over 15,000 Australian dollars was paid to import these items. Because of the large amount of excess baggage being brought in by the group, Australian Customs searched the entire group. This search revealed 4 litres of concentrated hydrochloric acid, including some in containers marked as hand soap. Among the other chemicals that Australian Customs officials found were ammonium chloride, sodium sulfate, perchloric acid and ammonium water. All of the chemicals and some of the laboratory equipment were seized by Australian authorities. As a result of the search, 2 ORM members, Sichi Endo, a biochemist and Minister of Health and Welfare for the ORM, and Tomomasa Nakagawa, were charged with carrying dangerous goods on an aircraft. The 2 members subsequently appeared in Australian court, pled guilty, and were fined about $1,700 each. The 2 claimed that the acid was for gold mining. These same 2 individuals were later arrested by Japanese authorities in connection with the Tokyo subway attack. Australian authorities believed that the cult planned the logistics for transporting their goods to Banjawan Station well in advance of the trip. They chartered 3 aircrafts and, having lost their chemicals to Australian authorities, the Orm used their real estate agent and their geologist, both of whom were Australian citizens, to obtain new chemicals for them from chemical wholesalers. These chemicals were obtained either in the name of the Orm's front businesses or in the name of the real estate agent's company. All payments for the chemicals were made in cash. The Orm apparently went to great lengths to obtain these chemicals, including flying one of their members over 4,000 miles from Perth to Melbourne to obtain 2 25-gram bottles of a chemical unavailable in Perth. The 2 bottles cost the Orm a total of $136, but in order to obtain them, the Orm spent over $800 in airfare. The Orm also tried to hire earth-moving equipment from a mining operation at an adjoining station. The mine operators refused to lend the equipment without a mine worker to operate it, to which the Orm did not agree. A backhoe was hired by the Orm without an operator from a rental company for 3 days, between September 16 and 18 in 1993. Digging and evidence of earth-moving equipment has been found at the Banjawan Station property. The Orm also established a laboratory on the Banjawan property, which was stocked with computers and various digital and laboratory equipment. The door of the laboratory was marked with Japanese characters and an English subtitle which read, Toyota Laboratory. This may be a reference to a Toru Toyota, a sect member who arrived in Australia with Asahara. Witnesses told Australian Federal Police that the laboratory contained laptop computers, digital equipment, glass tubing, glass evaporators, beakers, Bunsen burners, and ceramic grinding and mixing bowls. There were limestone or calcrete-type rocks on the floor. Other equipment included a small laboratory-sized rock crushing machine and 2 small generators. The staff has confirmed from Australian authorities that most of the cult members who were Japanese citizens left Australia by the 4th of October 1994. In October 1993, Asahara and 4 of the original group applied for tourist visas to return to Australia. However, acting on information provided by the Australian Federal Police, the Immigration Department refused them visas, along with visas for 12 other Orm members. Asahara petitioned his visa denial with a letter to the Australian Federal Minister for Immigration. In the letter, he said he was blind and needed the help of 2 aides. Also, because his life was under threat, he said he needed 17 bodyguards to accompany him on his trip to Australia. He said that his Tokyo headquarters had been sprayed with a diluted harmful gas and that during trips to Russia, he had received bomb threats. In late October 1993, 2 other Orm members did obtain visas. These 2 arrived in Perth on the 30th of October 1993 and stayed at Banjawan Station until April of 1994. While there, one of the Orm members petitioned the Australian Pastoral Board to destock Banjawan Station of its sheep. This petition was denied. Inspections by Western Australian Pastoral Board members revealed that several wells were either fouled or not operating, and the board called for an Australian manager to be hired for the property or the lease would be revoked. The cult members did hire a manager. While at the property, the manager says that the 2 sect members maintained constant contact with their superiors in Japan, with instructions being received by fax or telephone. The manager did not witness any experiments or mineral exploration. The equipment and chemicals inside the laboratory were removed about March or April 1994 to accommodate sheep shearing teams. The Orm members insisted that either the sheep not be shorn or that they be shorn by others who would be flown in from Japan. Approximately 2,000 sheep were subsequently sold to a slaughterhouse shortly after shearing. On the 28th of April 1994, these last 2 remaining cult members at Banjawan Station returned to Japan. They were replaced by an Orm member who is an Australian citizen and Tyoshi Maki, a Japanese citizen who had been part of the Orm's original advance team. Shortly after the sarin gas attack in Matsumoto in June 1994, Banjuan Station was offered for sale by the cult. Maki handled the details of the sale and seemed anxious that the sale proceed quickly. The property was sold in late July of 1994 for 237,000 Australian dollars, almost $165,000 less than what the Orm had paid for it only a year earlier. The Orm's activity on the property is partially known, and to some degree, a lot of it is still a mystery. Various police sources indicate that Hayakawa was interested in extracting uranium from Australia for the development of nuclear weapons. Documents seized from Hayakawa include some 10 pages written during Hayakawa's April to May 1993 visit to Australia, which refer to the whereabouts of properties of uranium in Australia, including one referencing praising the quality of the uranium in the state of South Australia. Australia is one of the world's leading exporters of uranium ore. It appears, however, that the Orm was interested in more than just mining on the Banjuan property. The chairwoman for the Aboriginal community living near the sheep station, Phyllis Thomas, said that she and other Aborigines saw about 5 people wearing full-length suits and helmets on a remote site in late August of 1993. The suited cult members were standing by a twin-engine aeroplane and others were on board in the plane. In March 1995, shortly after the Tokyo subway attack, the Australian police were invited to the sheep station by its new owners, who had found papers with Japanese writing and various chemicals. The chemicals that police found could have been used for mineral processing or to make an irritant gas. They included perchloric acid, nitric acid, ferric chloride, ammonia solution, hydrochloric acid, chloroform, potassium dichromate, and other unidentified solutions. The staff has confirmed that these chemicals are almost identical to the chemicals carried on board the aircraft by Asahara and his people when they flew into Perth in 1993. Only 2 to 3 litres of each chemical was found in an outhouse which bore a sign saying laboratory, while larger quantities were located in a portable building. Although the Orm members had originally stated that the chemicals they sought to bring into Australia were for the purposes of gold mining, there was no evidence of gold mining having ever been carried out. The current owners of the property have stated that the Japanese occupants had a number of gas masks in their possession, but that they took them with them when they left. One gas mask was left behind and seized by Australian Federal Police. Paper dust masks were also located in a plastic bag bearing Japanese writing. The staff has confirmed that the Orm conducted experiments with sarin gas on sheep at its property in Banjuan. The Australian Justice Minister Duncan Kerr said that members of the Orm tested sarin gas in Australia before the Tokyo subway attack. He said that tests on wool and soil samples taken from the Banjuan station had confirmed traces of the chemical. Kerr said that sarin residue had been found in and near a group of about 29 dead sheep on the station. Specifically, traces of the acid that results when sarin breaks down was found in the soil and in the wool of the sheep found in the area. In addition, authorities found a document written in Japanese entitled Banjuan Station. This document suggested the cult may have been experimenting on the sheep. The document contained notations for classifying dead or injured sheep by using unique Japanese markings. Australian Federal Police have also confirmed that some of the sheep were just killed with blunt force to the head. Even stranger, and possibly even more terrifying. On the night of the 28th of May, 1993, a mysterious seismic disturbance was detected in Western Australia, and found to have emanated from just south of Banjuan Station. The event sent shockwaves through hundreds of miles of desert, but was witnessed only by a few long-distance truck drivers and gold prospectors. They reported seeing a fireball in the sky and hearing a protracted low-frequency sound. The cause of the event, however, remains a mystery. An asteroid impact would have left a large crater, perhaps 300 yards or 270 metres across, none of which was ever found. Alternatively, a bolide or like an airburst caused by a stony asteroid of up to some tens of metres in diameter would not have reached the surface, but likely would have exploded in the atmosphere, creating a large shock wave, but not an impact crater, like what happened with the Tunguska event. This option, the possibility which was driven home by the widely observed February 2013 Russian media event, would have led to measurements and observations that are entirely consistent with data and eyewitness reports, far more so than a seismic disturbance, which would be difficult to reconcile with the whole fireball in the sky sightings. A mine explosion was also unlikely, as it was 170 times more powerful than the largest mining explosion known in Australia up to that time. The Urban Geoscience Division of the Australian Geological Survey organisation determined that the seismic traces of the event, quote, showed similar characteristics consistent with typical seismic activity for Western Australia, end quote. Basically, they're saying the event was most likely a minor earthquake. Following the revelation that Banjuan was owned by the Aum Shinrikyo doomsday cult, there was also speculation in 1997 that this event might have been the result of a test explosion of a nuclear device they had built. The event was determined to have the strength of, quote, a small nuclear explosion, perhaps equal to up to 2,000 tons of high explosives, end quote. It was known that the Aum were interested in developing nuclear as well as chemical weapons, as they had recruited 2 nuclear engineers from the former Soviet Union and had been mining uranium at Banjuan. This was reported in 1997 in the New York Times, although the Australian Federal Police investigation found no evidence of this or any equipment that might indicate such research, but just because they didn't find it doesn't mean it wasn't there at some stage. The Aum had been quite successful at keeping their true intentions hidden. It would seem that Aum Shinrikyo had been using the faraway, quiet location of the Banjuan sheep station to perfect their techniques in preparation for their upcoming act of domestic terrorism. On the 20th of March, 1995, in Tokyo, Japan, members of the cult movement in 5 coordinated attacks released sarin gas on 3 lines of the Tokyo metro, then part of the Tokyo subway, during rush hour. This killed 12 people, severely injured 50 others, and caused temporary vision problems for nearly 1,000 other victims. The attack was directed against trains passing through the Kasumigaseki and Nagatacho provinces, which is home of the Japanese government. The group never confessed. They claimed that those who carried out attacks did so secretly without being known to other executives and ordinary believers. Whether or not that is true, what is true is that just 2 days ago, at the time of this recording anyway, on the 6th of July 2018, after exhausting all appeals, Shoko Asahara, the leader and founder of the Doomsday cult, along with 6 other followers, was executed in Japan by hanging. Aum Shinrikyo, which split into Aleph and Hikari no Wa in 2007, has been formally designated a terrorist organisation by several countries, including the European Union, Russia, Canada, Kazakhstan, and the United States. Japan's Public Secretary Examination Commission considers Aleph and Hikari no Wa, the modern-day versions of Aum Shinrikyo, to be branches of a, quote, dangerous religion. It announced in January 2015 that they would remain under surveillance for 3 more years. The Japanese government ended surveillance of Hikari no Wa in 2017, but continues to keep Aleph under watch, which is probably a good idea. I had a look at the website of the Aleph organisation, and after finding a way to get their website in English, a lot of their time and effort is spent trying to explain away the events perpetrated by Asahara and his followers. It's just typical religious nutbaggery. But there you have it. What started with 44 sheep being picked up on the way to Australia by the First Fleet in 1788 started an agricultural and livestock industry that is now worth billions of dollars. Brought about the establishment of sheep and cattle stations that are larger than any other in the world. Places where there's so much space you don't know what to do with it all. Places where it's so out of the way that a Japanese doomsday cult could plan and test their crazy ideologies without anyone even noticing. Now that is a terrifying idea.
This song is kind of a reworking of an older song called Whitby Town that it was about a convict in England going to Botany Bay, being sentenced and transported for stealing something very simple, and he gets caught and sentenced and tried, and it's his journey. And I figured I'd rewrite it from the perspective of a Dublin man in the 1798 rebellion, and you'll hear a few rebellion songs, and we were very good at failed rebellions. And this was one of them, one of the major ones, 1798 rebellion, when the French were meant to come over and along with General Humbert and Wolfe Tone and kind of collectively get a ground support of troops from Ireland, and the French and Irish would, overtake Ireland from the English and then go and rout the English in England. And and I suppose if that would have happened, we would have been drinking coffee and eating croissants. But now it doesn't. We tea and toast. So it didn't happen, and many people were killed. And one of the thing about if you were young enough, if you joined a militia, men and young enough apparently, and if you were caught, they couldn't kill you. They couldn't hang you. So the nearest thing that they could do was transport you. So next worst thing. So this is the journey. So there's a chorus. Son, oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. It happens a lot. So, yeah, you ready for it? Yeah. Okay. My name is James O'Donnell. In iron and chains I'm bound. In exile from my native land as a traitor to the crown. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. I was born unto the Dublin streets, a native wild and free. When I was young, I'd sport and run by the Coombe and Liberties. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. Well, all were poor, we did endure the worst of old John Bull. The deprivations of our lot, we swore we'd pay in full. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. So I joined the brave militiamen, and we assembled in a band, and we marched on the fight to win for to free our native land. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. fought hard and we fought long, but outnumbered 5-1. We were hunted through the lanes and streets, killed with pike and gun. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. Some were hung on the gibbet spun, and woeful was her fate. I was taken to Kilmainham jail, my sentence to await. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. Well, the jury found me guilty, and they stood my crime to pay. Well, the judge, he called out from the dock, well, you're bound for Botany Bay. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. I saw my aged father trembling at the bar. Likewise I saw my mother tearing her white hair. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. Well, they took me to a vessel moored at Customs House Quay. Well, the sailors stood around and jeered, no more this land you'll see. Oh son, your days are done, you're bound for Botany Bay. And I watched old Erin fade from view, and tears did flood my eyes. That verdant land I'll see no more until the day I die. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. My name is James O'Donnell, in iron and chains I'm bound, in exile from my native land as a traitor to the crown. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay. Oh son, where are you gone? You're bound for Botany Bay.